Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Jim Big Red Wetrich. I think I got his last name right, or hope I did. He's the author of Stifled, Where Good Leaders Go Wrong. And he's been, um, and I hope that we are going to have a great conversation. I have every reason to believe we will. So let's bring James on and we'll start the conversation. Hey, James, how
Good.
are you today?
I'm good, Josh. I'm good. I'm honored and delighted to be with you and your audiences today. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great, thanks. So let's start with your book. What does stifled mean? I mean, it's an interesting title.
Yeah, I think what's happening a lot in big companies, and it doesn't necessarily occur solely in big companies, but in a lot of companies, things that managers are doing, things that leaders are doing, are stifling the employees. Um, in spite of all we know about good management, good leadership practices, there's still a lot of unregulated activities out there, and people are really challenging many people in the workforce by their business practices and how they carry out themselves, and their lack of self-awareness or their poor communication styles and techniques. So it really is, hopefully, Josh, a wake-up call for managers and leaders to think seriously about how they're running their organizations.
So why do you think this is still happening? I mean, this is not like, brand new news that that managers stifle the people that work for them. And it's not brand new news that it hurts productivity, and it's not brand new news that increases turnover. So why do you think people still do that?
I think there's a couple reasons, and I'm working on an update to the book. I'm going to call it Stifled 2.0 from bad to worse. I think there's a couple reasons, Josh. One, I don't believe companies are doing a good job of managing the managers, right? Um, at the end of the year, my boss looks at my numbers, my goals, my market share, my profits, my sales, and decides whether or not I've done a good job, regardless of how I'm actually carrying myself out in the office with my team, my employees, and people working for me. So it's sort of evaluation done in a vacuum. Um, the second thing is I truly believe, Josh, that we are working twice as hard as we did 20 years ago. The pace of business is absolutely just light speed and relentless. And the pressures to keep up, the pressures to run faster on the treadmill, the pressures to be in so many places at one time, doing so many things, are just causing people to take their eye off the ball and not realize that what they're doing is really hurting the employees, the company, and the productivity. Um, I I can't tell you. I've coached well over 150 people, and people are struggling trying to find information. Right here, we are in the information age. But at work, I have to check Teams, I have to check Outlook, I have to check my text messages, I have to check SharePoint, I have to check Slack. And believe it or not, people are spending an inordinate amount of times trying to find information or just keep up on information. And it's a very, very, very challenging milieu, Josh, right now for workers.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So my observation is it's not so much the business is going faster, which it is.
Yeah.
It's that people are being asked to do two, three, sometimes even four jobs
Yeah.
that used to be one job.
Yeah.
And this is especially true in big organizations. Small
Yeah.
organizations, not so much, because there aren't that many jobs there
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah. No,
except for the owner.
yeah,
The
yeah,
owner in small
yeah,
companies does 18
right.
jobs, but
Sure, sure, sure. No, I agree with you, Josh. I agree with you. And I mean, just look at the major restructurings we've seen in the last year from ginormous companies, Facebook, Google, we could go down the list. And people are absolutely being asked to do more. There's no doubt. Yeah.
so is that counterproductive, do you think?
I think the pace of business and the fact that we aren't allowing for non-transactional time, right? There is no time for Jim and Josh to run down to the dining room, grab a cup of coffee, and sit at a table and just have conversation. So I think we need to do a much better job as leaders, as senior leaders, as the CEO and his or her staff, right? Setting expectations about how we are going to work, what that looks like, and the fact we just can't have an entire organization zooming from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Right? It's just not sustainable. So I believe we really need to set boundaries for how people are working, when they're working, and how they go about their work, and also improving greatly the communication. I can't tell you how many people I talk to during my coaching that are still having challenges with their boss's communication style.
You know, the thing that I find really interesting, I think a lot of this issue comes down to the business press.
Yeah.
And this is why. I mean, if you read the business press, who do they hold up as being the role models that everyone else should follow? Elon Musk, who thinks you should work 100 hours a week and sleep in the business, and Jack Welch, which destroyed GE.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, you know, when you're holding these folks up as being role models, is it any surprise that managers and companies act like that?
I'm 110% aligned with your observation in that regard. I mean, look how Jack Welch's main protege, who grew up at GE, who took his job, struggled, and eventually wrote a book about it. Jeff Immelt, entitled Hot Seat. And one of the striking observations he made in that book is, I wish I'd said I don't know more often. Well, I'm sure under Welch, you couldn't say I don't know. You had to dance and make something up. And some of these things are so complicated, Josh, we can't do that. And I've read interviews recently, I guess, about Elon's new book that's out, and he talks about, psychological safety is for whatever, I can't remember the quote, wimps, babies, whatever.
Right.
And it's just amazing. It's just this is these role models are doing a great disservice to people and to organizations.
Yeah, it seems to me that we should be thinking about turning the org chart upside down. I've been saying this for years, is that the job of a manager is to make the people's job who report to them easier, not harder. And I'm a big fan of a software methodology called Scrum. And the reason I'm so enamored with that is at the end of a sprint, which is a 2 or 3 week period where something actually gets produced, you have a recap meeting or a retrospective, and in the retrospective you answer 3 questions. What about the last work in the sprint that you love? What about the work in the last sprint that you hate? And what would have to change for the stuff you hate to become stuff you love? And if managers actually did that without even using Scrum, or just use those questions periodically with the people that work with them, my bet is they would get a more productive workforce that would be much, much happier.
No doubt. I totally agree with you. And it's also the notion of just slowing down, right? Being a little bit more intentional, being a little bit more deliberate, and evaluating what you're doing and how you're doing it on a continuous basis. Again, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. People are just running so fast that they can't even jump off the treadmill. They're afraid they're going to crash. Just getting
Yeah.
off and slowing down. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a topic I'd like to talk about a little bit, self awareness. In my opinion, and I'm, certainly have been guilty of this in my life, and I'm working at getting better at it, but I think most managers are terribly unself aware, including owners, by the way. Owners are probably worse than managers because there's nobody there to say, hey, you're going down the wrong path. Do you have
Uh,
any?
I wrote quite a section in my book about this topic, and I love. put some quotes in there from Warren Bennis, who I think really wrote some great pieces on enhancing your self awareness and being more self aware. And as a small business owner myself, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who was in the entrepreneurs organization for a couple of years, right, had a successful business. Um, you're right. There often in small businesses no one around to challenge you or to tell you differently, and whether it's a small organization or otherwise, I think doing 360 assessments, getting independent feedback, getting feedback from friends, colleagues, mentors, advisors, board members, I just don't think you can get enough feedback.
But the challenge comes in, most people really don't want feedback because they don't want to be told what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you give feedback where you don't make somebody wrong?
Well, I think I think that's a great question, and I think it comes down a little bit to communication styles. But I think we don't. My bias in this regard is not to come up with a list of 20 things that I'm doing wrong and I need to change, right? And the list may be 50, not 20. Who knows? It could be long. Let's pick the one or two or three things that really are important to me, to the employees, to the organization, and let's work on these sort of piecemeal at a time, right? Eat the proverbial elephant one bite at a time. I think sometimes we swing the pendulum a little bit too far, and we can sort of moderate that, and let's just pick a couple things that are really important. And when I encourage managers to roll out their 360 assessments, I like them to share it with their team. I like them to recognize the fact that I've gotten the feedback, I've read the feedback, I've heard the feedback, and here's the things I'm going to be consciously trying to improve or do better on. And we'll discuss this every quarter or every month or whatever it is, and just be more visible and be more accountable and be more intentional about it.
Yeah, one of my favorite management techniques is called appreciative inquiry,
Hmm.
where essentially you're looking at what people do well and you help them magnify that. My
Yep.
experience, it's much, much, much easier to magnify a strength and fix a weakness.
Agree, agree. And I like that technique a lot. And I've used it with some of my coaching clients. I agree with you.
You know, we use it, I mean, every organization I'm with, I say, look, if we're going to do something, let's focus on what we do well, become world class at that, and maybe just manage the weaknesses that we have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, Josh, I'm 66 years old. I'm still making mistakes. I'm still learning, right? And I still need feedback and people to give me observations on how my behaviors are affecting them and the organization.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. I mean, I'm 71 and I'm far from being perfect. In fact, I would
Yeah,
say
yeah,
I'm mostly imperfect.
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
So, what is your personal credo? Creeder,
Yeah,
credo,
yeah.
credo.
So yeah,
That.
yeah. So Josh, about 25 years ago or so, I read an obituary in the Wall Street Journal about the founder of one of the very, very large international hotel chains, and I cannot remember for you which one it was. But in the obituary, it mentioned that this gentleman, this founder, had a personal credo, and he used it to manage the organization. And I just love that. I thought that was awesome, and I created my own personal credo, and I write about it a little bit in the book. And it's very simple. It says, "Whomever you serve, serve them with caring and respect. Wherever you reach, reach beyond your grasp." That's sort of the Robert Browning line. Wherever you go, go as a leader, and above all, have fun. And I hand it to people that come in my office. I hand it to people that are interviewing for jobs in the companies I work for. And I think it's just really important that people know what's important to me. What do I stand for? Who am I? And how do I run my life?
And it's also important to be tell yourself the truth about whether something is real or not real.
Right. Agree. Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agree.
Patrick Lencioni has a wonderful way of evaluating values. In the book, The Advantage, he talks about four types of values, but there's two which I think are really important, which is what's a core value, what's an aspirational value, and it's unbelievably important to label each one correctly
Yeah.
because if you don't, you're not being taken seriously by the rank and file people in your company.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love his work, and I love that book, and I think it's very important words of wisdom for people that are running organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, my favorite example is one of my core values now is personal responsibility.
Yeah,
Personal responsibility was not always a core value with me. For many years, it was a no value because I didn't even know it existed.
yeah,
Then it became an aspirational value, even though I called it a core value. And that did me almost as much damage as not having any values at all.
yeah, yeah,
And then I finally got around to saying, gee, I need some work on this and I need your help to get there.
yeah,
And I think that when you call an aspirational value, and you say, I need your help, don't use the word aspirational because your folks aren't going to understand what it means, but use, I need your help making this real. You're showing some vulnerability.
yeah.
And when we show vulnerability, people want to help. Does that make
Absolutely,
sense?
absolutely, 110%. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the notion of really expressing that vulnerability and putting yourself in front of your organization at moments of vulnerability is really a great way to build trust and build a esprit de corps in the organization.
And it's especially true if you come across a little bit severe, like I often do.
Yeah,
And if I don't show up with some vulnerability, A, no one's going to want to have a conversation with me. And B, I'm never going to have an honest conversation. And C, honest conversations only happen when you probe. Because in my
yeah,
experience, at
right.
least in the businesses I've run,
Yeah.
nobody tells me the truth out of the box.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting you say that. In my last job, and I write about this in the book a little bit. When and I talk to my leaders about this, my coaching clients. In my last job, I went into as a president and general manager. One of my VPs, who had six people working for him, said these three people are terrible and these three people are great. And the fact of the matter was, it was 180 degrees the other way around. The three people that were great were yes men and did whatever the VP wanted. And the other three that he wanted to fire and get rid of didn't like the VP, didn't like the way he managed, and didn't like his shenanigans. And in fact, after I got rid of the VP, those three that had to go turned out to be chronic overachievers and high performers. So people will tell you what they want you to believe, not what you need to know.
Right, right.
Yeah,
That's absolutely been
yeah,
true for me. So I'm a big fan of mentorism or
yeah.
mentors. And I'm assuming in the book you talk about how to get mentors. And so you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm glad you brought that up, Josh. I can tell you, I never could have possibly done what I did in the 11 years I was at Abbott Laboratories without several people who were, I think, more informal mentors, but still very powerful people in very senior positions that looked out for me. And when I look out over my business career and look at people who've been very successful, um, virtually every one of them had a mentor at some point, somebody looking over their shoulder, helping them. And it's something I encourage all of my coaching clients to do, finding mentors, particularly if they're in a large company within the organization, but also mentors outside the organization. And I'm completely aligned with you. There's just no substitute for what mentors can do to help you navigate the business you're in and also your career.
So how would you approach somebody you want them to mentor you?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's some people that have the bandwidth that are willing to have the conversation. There are some that don't have the bandwidth, aren't interested in mentoring. A number of companies have formal leadership development programs that include a mentoring component for those people that are picked in those leadership development programs. I think it's like a lot of things, Josh. I encourage my people to set time aside on their calendar, whether it's an hour a month or whatever time you want to do, 15 minutes a week, and just have conversations with people and say, look, I'm looking for a mentor, and if it's not something you're interested in, or you have the time to do, is there somebody else within the organization that I should be talking to? The other thing that I find a little surprising when I talk to a lot of my business leaders and executives I work with, I often ask them, have you reached out to whoever the person is? Some people call them HR partners, whoever supports you from a human resource standpoint. Have you reached out to those people and had this conversation with them? And virtually 100% of them have never done that, and they've never even thought about doing that. And I'm like, these are the people that are running, right, a very important function in your company, and they're very well networked, and they have good ideas of, who might be a good mentor for you. So I encourage people to reach out to their HR partner. I can tell you that the HR team when I was at Abbott was absolutely world class, and extremely helpful to people that were looking to develop and grow.
Yeah, that's true. The really big companies do that. The really bad big companies, they punish people, and it's like the home of brilliant jerks, which
Yep,
is a
agree.
which is a topic I would love to talk about, but unfortunately we're out of time. So,
That's a great title for a podcast,
what, the brilliant jerk?
Josh. Yeah.
Well, we've all had them in our
Yeah.
organizations, that's for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Yeah.
And my only advice, if you have a brilliant jerk working in your company, get rid of them as fast as you
Yeah.
possibly can, and let them go to where all brilliant jerks live, which is,
Yeah.
typically Silicon Valley tech companies, but
Yeah.
we won't go there. Anyway, Jim, we're unfortunately out of time, and I'm going to bet people are going to want to get a hold of you or read your book or find
Yep.
out more about you. How would they go
Great.
about doing that?
Yeah, great, Josh. They can just go to Jim Wetrich, 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 jimwetrich.com. And I've got all kinds of information on my book about me, and all the links to all my past 25 or so podcasts and interviews are all available there for you to listen to. And there's also information on how to order the book, which is widely available on Amazon.com and some other
Cool.
booksellers.
Sounds great. And I've got two things I'd like you to do. The first is about 421 and 22 times I've asked this, which is go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and please give us an honest rating and review. If you love us, give us 5 stars. If you don't, well, I'll only cry a little bit if you give me less than that, but I'll probably get over it. Second thing is I find with lots and lots of privately held business owners is they think their business is going to get them to be financially free from their business. I hate to give you some bad news. For most of us, it's not going to happen. You need to be doing other things. So we developed a program called the Financial Freedom Accelerator, which starts off with saying, where are you now? And where do we want to be in the future, whatever that future, how many years it is? And are you on the road to becoming financially free from your business? Or are you not on the road? And for too many of us, the answer is not. And if the answer is not, we'll help you figure out some strategies to have that not become yes. It's really easy to find out more information about it. You just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. Read about it. If you like what you're reading and want to see if it's a good fit for you, click on the Talk to Josh button, and we'll have a short conversation, see if the Financial Freedom Accelerator is right for you. This is Josh Patrick. We're with Jim Wetrich. I think I got that right this time. Um, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.